The summer sun gleamed as Kayla Henderson set up her stand. At 12 years old, she was just a black girl on a hot day, selling bottled water with a hand-painted sign and a dream of Disneyland. Neighbors smiled as coins clinked into her jar, cheering her determination and refreshing themselves in the heat. For a while, the street felt bright, safe, and kind. Then came Rebecca Caldwell, white, rigid, her gaze sharp with disdain. To her, Kayla wasn't a child but a nuisance. The police were called. The air grew heavy. But karma was faster than arrogance, and Rebecca would soon feel its bite. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The sun beat down mercilessly on the suburban Atlanta street as 12-year-old Kayla Henderson carefully unfolded her white plastic table. She positioned it perfectly on the grass near her townhouse's front walkway, making sure it was stable on the slightly uneven ground. Wiping sweat from her forehead, she stepped back to survey her workspace. "Perfect," she mumbled to herself, her bright smile reflecting her excitement. She hurried back inside to get her supplies, her braids bouncing with each step. Moments later, Kayla emerged carrying a large blue cooler, struggling slightly with its weight. She had spent the previous evening filling water bottles and freezing them just right. Not so frozen they'd be hard to drink, but cold enough to be refreshing in the intense Georgia heat. Setting down the cooler beside her table, Kayla reached into her pocket and pulled out the signs she'd made. She'd spent hours decorating them with careful lettering and cheerful drawings of water droplets wearing sunglasses. The main sign read, "Ice Cold Water, $1," in bold blue letters with smaller stars and hearts around the edges. As she arranged the bottles in neat rows on the table, Kayla couldn't help but imagine herself walking through the gates of Disneyland. She'd seen so many videos online, the castle, the rides, the characters walking around giving hugs to excited kids. Every bottle sold would bring her one step closer to that dream. A young couple jogging by slowed their pace as they approached her stand. The woman, still catching her breath, smiled warmly at Kayla. "What do we have here?" "Ice-cold water." Kayla straightened up proudly. "Would you like some? It's perfect for staying hydrated while exercising." The man chuckled, pulling out his wallet. "You make a good point. 2 bottles, please." As Kayla handed them their waters, the woman asked, "Are you saving up for something special?" Kayla's eyes lit up. "Yes. I'm going to Disneyland. Well, hopefully. Mom says we need to save up first, so I'm doing my part to help." "That's wonderful." The woman handed her a $5 bill. "Keep the change, sweetie. I hope you make it there soon." "Thank you so much." Kayla carefully tucked the money into her zippered pouch. "Have a great run." More neighbors passed by as the morning wore on. A man walking his golden retriever bought a bottle, letting his dog lap some water from a bowl Kayla had thoughtfully set out for pets. An elderly woman stopped to chat about her own memories of taking her children to Disneyland years ago, buying 2 bottles for later. Around 9:30, Kayla spotted her mother's tired figure walking up the street. Danielle Henderson still wore her hospital scrubs, her shoulders slightly slumped after a long night shift in the emergency room. But when she saw Kayla, her exhausted expression transformed into a proud smile. "Look at you, baby girl," Danielle called out, approaching the stand. "How's business going?" Kayla excitedly showed her mother the money pouch. "I've made $17 already, and Mrs. Chen from 3 doors down said she'll probably send her kids over later when it gets really hot." Danielle wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, studying the neat arrangement of the stand. "You did such a good job setting everything up. Those signs are beautiful." "Thanks, Mom." Kayla leaned into her mother's embrace. "I remembered everything you said about being professional, keeping the table clean, being polite, counting change carefully. I can see that." Danielle stifled a yawn. I'm so proud of you, taking initiative like this. But make sure you stay in the shade as much as you can, okay? And come inside if you get too hot. I will, Mom. I brought sunscreen and a hat, just like you told me to. That's my girl! Danielle kissed the top of Kayla's head. I need to get some sleep, but I'll set my alarm to check on you in a couple of hours. Go rest, Mom. I've got this covered. As Danielle headed inside, Kayla sold another bottle to a passing neighbor. She was carefully counting out change when she felt the weight of someone's stare. Looking up, she noticed Rebecca Caldwell standing across the street, arms crossed over her chest. Even from a distance, Rebecca's disapproval was clear in her rigid posture and pinched expression. Her steel-gray hair was perfectly styled, her clothing crisp and expensive-looking despite the heat. She stood in her manicured front yard, one hand on her hip, the other shading her eyes as she glared at Kayla's modest setup. Kayla's stomach did an uncomfortable flip as she watched Rebecca's frown deepen. She'd seen that look before, at the last neighborhood picnic, when some kids had been playing too close to Rebecca's prized rose bushes, and at the community pool when teenagers were supposedly swimming too loudly. Rebecca's eyes narrowed as she surveyed Kayla's table, the cooler and the cheerful signs. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she shook her head slowly, as if personally offended by the very sight of a child selling water on a hot summer day. Kayla tried to focus on arranging her bottles, pretending not to notice the intense scrutiny from across the street. But she could still feel Rebecca's cold stare, like an uncomfortable weight pressing down on her shoulders, threatening to crush her morning's happiness and her dreams of Disneyland into dust. Rebecca marched across the street, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Her clipboard swung like a weapon at her side, and her face was set in stern lines of disapproval. Kayla's heart started beating faster as the HOA president approached her small stand. "Young lady," Rebecca's voice cut through the morning air like ice. "Do you have a permit for this operation?" She gestured dismissively at Kayla's neat display with her clipboard. Kayla straightened up, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm just selling water bottles to save up for—" "That's not what I asked." Rebecca's words sliced through Kayla's explanation. She pulled out a pair of reading glasses, perching them on her nose as she flipped through papers on her clipboard. According to HOA regulations, Section 4, Paragraph 12, all business activities conducted within neighborhood boundaries require proper permits and board approval. "But it's just water," Kayla said, her voice getting smaller. She glanced down at her carefully made signs, which suddenly seemed childish under Rebecca's stern glare. "Like a lemonade stand." Rebecca let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Oh, please. This is illegal street vending, plain and simple. Do you have a business license? Health department certification? Insurance?" She paused between each question, letting them land like little daggers. "I didn't think so." Kayla's throat felt tight. She looked down at her shoes, fighting back tears that threatened to spill. The morning's excitement crumbled around her like sand. "And what would Disney think?" Rebecca continued, her voice dripping with mock concern. "If they knew you were trying to fund your little trip through illegal activities." She picked up one of Kayla's water bottles, examining it as if it might be contaminated. "Really, this is just sad. Is there a problem out here?" Danielle Henderson's voice, though quiet, carried clearly across the yard. She stood in the doorway of their townhouse, still in her scrubs, but with steel in her spine despite her exhaustion. She walked toward them with measured steps, her face calm, but her eyes alert. "Oh, good," Rebecca said, turning to face Danielle. "The responsible party, Mrs. Henderson. Are you aware that your daughter is operating an unauthorized business venture on HOA property?" "I'm aware that my daughter is showing initiative and entrepreneurial spirit," Danielle replied evenly. She moved to stand beside Kayla, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. And I'm wondering why you're out here harassing a child instead of enjoying your Saturday morning." Rebecca's nostrils flared. "Harassing? I am enforcing neighborhood regulations, which is my duty as HOA president. This kind of uncontrolled commerce attracts the wrong element and lowers property values." A few neighbors had stopped to watch the confrontation. Mrs. Chen, who had promised to send her kids over later, stood on her front porch with her arms crossed. The jogging couple from earlier had circled back around, slowing their pace to observe the scene. The wrong element? Danielle's voice remained steady, but her grip on Kayla's shoulder tightened slightly. "Please, explain exactly what you mean by that." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably, aware of their growing audience. "This isn't about... obviously this is about maintaining standards, order. What's next? Pop-up flea markets? Street vendors on every corner?" "It's a 12-year-old girl selling water on a hot day," Danielle said. "But you're right about one thing. This isn't about water bottles or permits. This is about you needing to exercise control over everyone and everything in this neighborhood." "How dare you?" Rebecca's face flushed red. "I am trying to protect..." "You're trying to protect nothing but your own sense of authority," Danielle cut in, her voice still calm but firm. "And you're willing to crush a child's dreams to do it." The small crowd of observers had grown. Mr. Patterson, walking his golden retriever, had stopped to watch. The elderly woman who had bought water earlier stood near Mrs. Chen's porch, shaking her head disapprovingly at Rebecca. Rebecca's face had gone from red to purple. She looked around at the watching neighbors, clearly expecting support, but finding none. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her clipboard tighter. This is unacceptable," she sputtered. "You can't just... I won't allow..." "You won't allow what, exactly?" Danielle asked quietly. "A child to learn about hard work and saving money? To dream about something special and work toward it? This ends now," Rebecca declared, fumbling in her designer purse for her phone. Her fingers shook as she punched at the screen. "If you won't listen to reason, perhaps you'll listen to the authorities." She raised the phone to her ear, turning away from the disapproving stares of the neighbors. "Yes, police. This is Rebecca Caldwell, HOA president at Oakwood Gardens. I need to report an unauthorized vendor who is disturbing the peace in our neighborhood." She paused, glaring at Danielle and Kayla. Yes, they're being completely uncooperative. "No, I don't feel safe. They're becoming hostile." Danielle shook her head slowly, keeping her arm around Kayla, who watched with wide eyes as Rebecca paced back and forth, her voice getting louder and more shrill with each word. "I need someone here immediately," Rebecca practically shouted into the phone. "This is a serious violation of multiple ordinances, and these people are refusing to comply with HOA regulations." "Yes, I'll hold." The low rumble of a police cruiser's engine cut through the tense morning air. Blue and white lights flashed as the patrol car pulled up to the curb, parking just behind Kayla's modest water stand. Kayla's small hand squeezed her mother's tightly, her earlier confidence draining away at the sight of two officers stepping out of the vehicle. "It's okay, baby," Danielle whispered, giving her daughter's hand a reassuring squeeze. "Just stay calm and let me handle this." Rebecca's posture straightened as she watched the officers approach, a self-satisfied smile spreading across her face. She clutched her clipboard to her chest like a shield of authority, practically bouncing on her heels with anticipation. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," Rebecca called out, stepping forward to meet them. "As I explained on the phone, we have an unauthorized vendor refusing to cease operations and..." "Ma'am, let us assess the situation," the first officer interrupted, holding up his hand. He was older, with salt and pepper hair visible beneath his cap. His nameplate read, Miller. His younger partner hung back slightly, surveying the scene with a puzzled expression. Officer Miller's eyes moved from Rebecca's agitated state to the simple folding table with water bottles, then to Danielle and Kayla. His stern expression softened suddenly with recognition. "Nurse Henderson?" he asked, his eyebrows rising. "Is that you?" Danielle nodded, maintaining her composed demeanor. "Officer Miller, I didn't expect to see you today." Rebecca's smile faltered slightly as she watched the exchange. "You know each other?" "Know her." Officer Miller let out a short laugh. "This woman saved my brother's life last year. Emergency surgery after that big pileup on I-85. He turned to his partner. "Remember I told you about that Johnson? The nurse who stayed 4 hours past her shift to make sure Tommy pulled through?" Officer Johnson nodded, now looking at Danielle with respect. "Yes, sir. You said she was the reason your brother made it to his daughter's wedding?" Rebecca shifted uncomfortably, her clipboard lowering slightly. That's all very nice, but it has nothing to do with the current situation. There are regulations." "And what exactly is the current situation?" Officer Miller asked, his tone becoming professional but notably less friendly as he addressed Rebecca. He gestured at Kayla's stand. "Because what I'm seeing is a young lady selling water on a hot day. Where's the emergency that required police response?" "She doesn't have permits." Rebecca's voice rose shrilly. "It's a violation of HOA regulations and city ordinances. There could be health code violations, liability issues." "Miss," Officer Johnson cut in, "did you really call emergency services about a kid's water stand?" The growing crowd of neighbors murmured disapprovingly. Mrs. Chen shook her head and muttered something that made the elderly woman next to her nod vigorously. Mr. Patterson's golden retriever let out a low whine, as if even the dog was embarrassed by Rebecca's behavior. "I'm trying to maintain order in this community," Rebecca insisted, but her voice had lost some of its earlier authority. "There are rules." "Ma'am," Officer Miller's tone was firm now, "calling police for non-emergencies ties up resources that could be needed for actual crisis situations. We respond to all calls, but this kind of thing?" He shook his head. "It's not a good use of emergency services." He turned to Kayla, who was still holding tight to her mother's hand. His face softened into a kind smile. "Young lady, how much are you charging for those waters?" $1, Kayla answered softly, then added with a bit more confidence, "I'm saving up to go to Disneyland with my mom." "Well then," Officer Miller reached for his wallet, "my partner and I would each like one. This Georgia heat's no joke." He handed Kayla a $10 bill. "Keep the change for your Disneyland fund." "Thank you, sir," Kayla said, her smile returning as she carefully handed bottles to both officers. Rebecca watched this exchange with growing disbelief, her face reddening again. But the regulations clearly state, "Ms. Caldwell," Officer Miller turned back to her, his voice stern but professional, "I strongly suggest you reconsider what constitutes an emergency in the future. Calling police over a child's water stand isn't just an overreaction. It's a waste of resources that could delay response to genuine emergencies." Officer Johnson nodded in agreement. "If you have concerns about HOA regulations, that's a civil matter. It's not a police emergency." The gathered neighbors had begun to disperse, but not before several of them approached Kayla's stand to buy water, making a point of being extra friendly and encouraging. Mrs. Chen announced loudly that she'd send her kids over later to buy the whole cooler. Rebecca stood rigid, watching as her attempt to assert authority crumbled around her. The smugness that had radiated from her earlier was replaced by a tight, angry expression. Her knuckles were white where they gripped her clipboard. "This isn't over," she hissed, turning sharply on her heel. As she stormed back across the street, her shoes clicking against the pavement even more aggressively than before, She shot a venomous glare over her shoulder at Danielle and Kayla. Not by a long shot. The officers remained for a few more minutes, chatting casually with Danielle about her brother's recovery, while Kayla proudly served customers who had lined up to support her. The morning sun continued to rise in the sky, promising another hot Georgia day perfect for selling cold water. Despite Rebecca's retreating figure, which disappeared behind her slammed front door, the kitchen was filled with the comforting aroma of baked chicken and rice as Danielle and Kayla sat down for dinner. Through their small window, the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks. The day's tension had melted away like ice cubes in the Georgia heat, replaced by the warm satisfaction of victory and vindication. And then, Mrs. Chen bought 10 bottles all at once, Kayla exclaimed, practically bouncing in her chair as she recounted the day's successes. Her fork waved enthusiastically in the air as she spoke. She said her kids would come by tomorrow, too. Danielle couldn't help but smile at her daughter's excitement. The morning's confrontation seemed to have only strengthened Kayla's entrepreneurial spirit rather than dampening it. That's wonderful, baby. How much did you make today? Kayla reached into her pocket and pulled out a carefully folded wad of bills. She smoothed them out on the table with pride, counting each one deliberately. $78! And that's after buying more water for tomorrow. Her eyes sparkled with determination. At this rate, I'll have enough for Disneyland in no time. I'm so proud of you, Danielle said, reaching across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. You handled yourself really well today, especially when… Her phone buzzed on the table, interrupting the moment. Then it buzzed again, and again. Danielle picked it up, expecting a text from work about her next shift. Instead, she found herself staring at an official-looking email from the Homeowners Association. Her stomach tightened as she opened it. Notice of violation, the subject line screamed in all caps. As her eyes scanned the text, the warmth of the evening seemed to drain away. Rebecca had filed a formal complaint against them, citing unauthorized commercial activity and violation of community standards. The notice threatened fines of $100 per day if the illegal business operation continued. Mom? Kayla's voice was small, noticing the change in her mother's expression. What's wrong? Nothing, baby, Danielle started to say, but her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from the neighborhood's online forum. Her heart sank as she clicked the link. There, in a post time-stamped just minutes ago, Rebecca had painted a very different picture of the day's events. She described Kayla as a disruptive influence who was turning our residential street into a commercial zone. But what made Danielle's blood boil was the thinly veiled attack on her parenting. What kind of mother, Rebecca's post read, lets her child run an unlicensed business on public property without supervision? What kind of example does this set for our community's children? As your HOA president, I cannot stand by while our neighborhood standards deteriorate. The comments section was already filling up with reactions. While some neighbors defended them, others, mostly Rebecca's usual supporters, were piling on with their own complaints about declining property values and setting dangerous precedents. Danielle set the phone down carefully, forcing her hands not to shake. She looked up to see Kayla watching her with worried eyes, the excitement of moments ago replaced by uncertainty. Mom? Kayla's voice wavered slightly. Did I do something wrong? No, baby, Danielle said firmly, pushing back her chair and opening her arms. Come here. Kayla crossed to her mother's side of the table, letting herself be folded into a tight hug. She might be 12, but in moments like these, she still seemed so small to Danielle. You didn't do anything wrong, Danielle repeated, stroking her daughter's hair. Some people they don't like it when others succeed. But that's their problem, not ours. Is Mrs. Caldwell still mad about the water stand? Kayla's voice was muffled against her mother's shoulder. "Mrs. Caldwell is trying to cause trouble," Danielle answered honestly. "But don't you worry about that. Remember what Officer Miller said? You're not doing anything wrong." They held the hug for a long moment before Danielle gently pulled back, forcing a smile. "Now, finish your dinner. You've got a big day of sales ahead tomorrow." "Are you sure it's okay?" Kayla asked, searching her mother's face. "Maybe I should stop." "Absolutely not," Danielle said firmly. "We don't let bullies win in this family. Remember what I always tell you?" A small smile tugged at Kayla's lips. "Stand tall and stand true." "That's right." Danielle kissed her forehead. "Now, eat up. Those vegetables aren't going to finish themselves." Later, after Kayla had gone to bed, Danielle sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of crickets through the window. Her phone sat in front of her, screen dark but somehow threatening, like a portal to more ugliness to come. She picked it up again, rereading Rebecca's post and the HOA notice. Her jaw tightened as she noticed new comments appearing, some with thinly veiled racist undertones about certain elements changing the neighborhood's character. The gentle, professional demeanor she'd maintained all day, the same calm presence she showed at the hospital through the worst emergencies, began to crack. Her hands clenched into fists on the table as the full weight of Rebecca's vindictiveness sank in. This wasn't just about a water stand anymore. This was about power, about putting people in their place, about making an example of anyone who dared to challenge Rebecca's authority. And she was using every weapon in her arsenal, the HOA, social media, neighborhood gossip, to do it. Danielle sat in the dim kitchen, her face hardening as she realized this fight was far from over. Rebecca wasn't going to stop. This was just the beginning. The community clubhouse buzzed with tension as residents filed in for the emergency HOA meeting. The space, usually reserved for book clubs and bridge games, felt more like a courtroom tonight. Cheap fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the faces of neighbors avoiding eye contact with each other. Danielle adjusted her scrubs. She'd come straight from her hospital shift and squeezed Kayla's hand as they found seats near the middle of the room. The notice of hearing had arrived that morning, demanding their immediate attendance to address ongoing violations of community standards. Rebecca Caldwell sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by other board members. Her gray blazer and perfect posture screamed authority, while her thin smile reminded Danielle of a cat who'd cornered its prey. A stack of papers sat neatly arranged before her, color-coded tabs jutting out from the edges. "Let's bring this meeting to order," Rebecca announced, tapping her gavel with theatrical precision. Her voice carried the fake warmth of a TV commercial. "We're here to address a serious violation of our community guidelines by Unit 247. Danielle felt Kayla shrink beside her as Rebecca dramatically lifted a photograph from her stack. It showed Kayla's water stand, but somehow the angle made their neat little setup look shabby and intrusive. "This unauthorized business operation," Rebecca continued, "has turned our residential street into a commercial zone, creating traffic hazards and disturbing the peace." She paused for effect. And when confronted about this violation, the resident became confrontational, forcing me to involve law enforcement. A few gasps echoed through the room. Danielle's jaw clenched at the blatant lies, but she kept her face neutral. She dealt with worse in the ER. Keeping calm during chaos was her specialty. "Mrs. Henderson," Rebecca's voice dripped with false concern, "would you care to explain your actions?" Danielle stood slowly, her scrubs rustling in the silence. "Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell. I'd be happy to clarify the situation." She smiled, matching Rebecca's artificial politeness. "My daughter Kayla set up a small water stand during the recent heat wave. She's saving money for a special trip, and several neighbors have commented on how her initiative brightened their day." Mrs. Chen, their next-door neighbor, nodded encouragingly from her seat. A few other residents shifted uncomfortably, clearly remembering their own childhood lemonade stands. As for becoming confrontational, Danielle continued evenly, I simply asked Mrs. Caldwell to stop intimidating my 12-year-old daughter. The police officers who responded, after Mrs. Caldwell called them, found nothing wrong with Kayla's activities. Rebecca's smile tightened. The HOA bylaws clearly state, Mom? Kayla's small voice interrupted. Can I say something? All eyes turned to the young girl as she stood, her shoulders straight despite her trembling hands. Danielle's heart swelled with pride at her daughter's courage. I just wanted to earn money for Disneyland, Kayla said, her voice growing stronger. I've never been, and Mom works so hard at the hospital saving people's lives. I thought if I worked hard too, I could make her proud, and we could go together. The room fell silent. Even Rebecca seemed momentarily thrown off balance by the simple honesty in Kayla's voice. Mr. Rodriguez, a retired teacher on the board, cleared his throat. Perhaps we're making too much of this. When I was growing up, every kid had a lemonade stand at some point. This isn't about childhood nostalgia, Rebecca snapped, recovering her composure. It's about rules and procedures. Section 8, paragraph 3, clearly prohibits commercial activities without prior board approval. She shuffled through her papers. Furthermore, the setup creates liability issues. What if someone claimed food poisoning from the water? The water is sealed store-bought bottles, Danielle pointed out calmly. That's not the point. Rebecca's voice rose slightly, betraying her frustration. The point is, rules exist for a reason. If we make one exception, soon everyone will want special treatment. Mrs. Chen raised her hand. But surely there's a difference between a child's water stand and running an actual business. The bylaws make no such distinction, Rebecca cut her off. And as president of this board, I have a duty to enforce these rules equally. She straightened her papers with sharp movements. The violation stands. Unit 247 will be fined $100 per day until this unauthorized activity ceases permanently. Several board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, but none spoke up. Rebecca's iron grip on the HOA was well known, and challenging her usually led to mysterious violations being discovered on the challenger's property. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, satisfaction creeping into her voice, any repeat violations will result in escalating penalties, up to and including potential eviction proceedings. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Even for Rebecca, this felt extreme. This meeting is adjourned, she declared, bringing down her gavel before anyone could object. As chairs scraped and people began filing out, Danielle held Kayla close. You did so well, baby, she whispered. I'm so proud of you for speaking up. But now we have to pay all that money, Kayla whispered back, her voice tight with worry. Maybe I should just forget about Disneyland. No way, Danielle said firmly, though her heart ached at the defeat in her daughter's voice. We're not giving up that easily. From her seat at the head of the table, Rebecca watched them with barely concealed triumph, already shuffling through more papers and making notes. Her victory smile never wavered as she observed the Hendersons walking toward the exit, clearly savoring every moment of their departure. The morning sun had barely cleared the rooftops when Danielle spotted the bright orange paper taped to her front door. Her stomach dropped as she stepped onto the dewy grass in her slippers. The official HOA letterhead glared back at her, topped with bold black letters that read, Notice of Violation. Danielle pulled the notice down, her hands shaking slightly as she read. The document listed a $100 fine for each day of unauthorized vending activities, with a demand for immediate payment. At the bottom, Rebecca's signature sprawled across the page in thick black ink, looking more like a victory flag than a signature. Mom? Kayla's voice came from behind her. "What's that?" Danielle turned to find her daughter still in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. She tried to hide the notice, but Kayla had already seen it. The girl's face fell as understanding dawned. "It's my fault," Kayla whispered, her lower lip trembling. "If I hadn't tried to sell water—" "Stop right there!" Danielle pulled her daughter into a tight hug. "None of this is your fault. You did nothing wrong. Mrs. Caldwell is the one who's wrong here." But Kayla's shoulders shook as she started to cry. "I just wanted to go to Disneyland. Now we have to pay all this money instead. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." "Baby, listen to me." Danielle knelt down to meet her daughter's eyes. "You were doing something good, working hard for something you want. That's exactly what I've always taught you to do. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about that." Their moment was interrupted by Mrs. Alvarez calling from next door. The retired schoolteacher stood on her porch in a flowered housecoat, coffee mug in hand. "Danielle! Kayla! Come over here a minute." Danielle wrapped an arm around Kayla's shoulders as they crossed the small patch of grass between their homes. Mrs. Alvarez's kind face creased with concern as she noticed Kayla's tears. "I saw Rebecca putting those notices up before dawn," Mrs. Alvarez said, shaking her head. "That woman has no shame. Come inside, both of you. I just made fresh coffee, and I have hot chocolate for Miss Kayla." The Alvarez kitchen smelled of coffee and cinnamon, warm and welcoming. As Kayla sipped her hot chocolate at the counter, some color returned to her cheeks. "You're not the first one she's done this to," Mrs. Alvarez said, settling into a kitchen chair. 2 years ago, it was the Martinez family. Their teenage son was mowing lawns for pocket money. Rebecca claimed he was running an illegal landscaping business. "What happened to them?" Danielle asked, wrapping her hands around a warm coffee mug. "They moved away." Mrs. Alvarez's face darkened. "Couldn't afford the fines. And last year, it was the Patels. Their daughter was giving math tutoring. Same story. Rebecca harassed them until they left." "So she has a pattern," Danielle said quietly. "Oh, yes. And have you noticed? It's never the Thompson kids with their expensive lemonade stand, or the Wilson boys washing cars. Just certain families." Mrs. Alvarez raised her eyebrows meaningfully. Danielle's jaw tightened as she understood the implication. "Well, she picked the wrong family this time. I'm not going anywhere." "Good," Mrs. Alvarez smiled. "You've got friends here, Danielle." "More than Rebecca knows." As if to prove her point, their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Mr. Chen from across the street stood there with his wife, both looking concerned. "We saw the notice," Mrs. Chen said. "It's not right. We want to help." Throughout the morning, more neighbors stopped by. Mrs. Rodriguez brought homemade cookies. The Patels returned, having heard what happened, offering their support and sharing their own experience. Even Officer Martinez, who had responded to Rebecca's call, dropped by to check on them. "The community's watching now," Mrs. Alvarez said, surveying the impromptu gathering in her kitchen. "Rebecca's always counted on people being too scared to stand up to her. But not everyone was supportive. Through the window, Danielle could see some neighbors hurrying past with averted eyes. A few even stopped to chat with Rebecca, who was making a show of inspecting properties with her ever-present clipboard. Around noon, Kayla went outside to pack away her water stand. She moved slowly, carefully folding the card table and stacking the unopened water bottles in their cooler. Each movement seemed heavy with disappointment. A sleek silver BMW cruised past, slowing as it approached their house. Rebecca sat behind the wheel, designer sunglasses perched on her nose. She watched Kayla dismantling her stand, a satisfied smirk playing across her face. Danielle stepped onto the porch, making sure Rebecca saw her. She stood tall in her nurse's scrubs, arms crossed, refusing to look away. Rebecca's smirk faltered slightly at Danielle's steady gaze. The BMW accelerated away, but Danielle kept watching until it disappeared around the corner. She then walked over to help Kayla with the last of the water bottles. "Does this mean we have to stop?" Kayla asked quietly, clutching an unopened bottle. "No, baby," Danielle replied, her voice firm. "This means we have to fight smarter. We're not giving up on your dream. We're just getting started." That evening, shadows stretched across Kayla's bedroom walls as the sun began to set. Danielle had just finished heating up leftover lasagna for dinner when she heard muffled sobs coming from upstairs. Following the sound, she found Kayla curled up on her bed, clutching her Mickey Mouse plush toy, a treasured gift from her 10th birthday. "Baby, what's wrong?" Danielle asked softly, though she already knew the answer. She sat down on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping slightly under her weight. Kayla's voice came out shaky between hiccups. Maybe I should just stop selling water. It's causing too much trouble." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Disneyland was a stupid dream anyway. The words hit Danielle like a physical blow. She'd seen her daughter's eyes light up countless times as she talked about meeting Princess Tiana, riding Space Mountain, and watching the fireworks over the castle. Now those same eyes were dull with defeat. "Come here," Danielle said, patting the spot next to her. Kayla hesitated, then scooted over. "Let me tell you something about dreams and hard work." Danielle reached for the photo on Kayla's nightstand. A picture of herself in her nursing school graduation gown, holding a 3-year-old Kayla. "You see this picture? When I decided to become a nurse, lots of people told me I couldn't do it. Single mom, working 2 jobs, taking night classes. They said I was foolish." "Really?" Kayla looked up, her tear-stained face showing surprise. "But you're the best nurse ever." Danielle smiled, running her fingers through her daughter's curly hair. "I am now, but it wasn't easy. There were nights I wanted to quit. Nights I cried just like you're crying now. But you know what kept me going?" Kayla shook her head. "Dignity," Danielle said firmly, "and knowing that what I was doing was right. When people try to push you down, baby, that's when you need to stand tallest. But Mrs. Caldwell wants you to give up. She wants you to feel small." Danielle's voice grew passionate. "But you're not small, Kayla. You're my brave, beautiful girl who had an idea and worked hard to make it happen. That's something to be proud of." Kayla sat up straighter, wiping away the last of her tears. "I did make $47 before she stopped me." "That's right. And you did it honestly, treating every customer with respect." Danielle reached into her pocket and pulled out the day's water bottle earnings. "Remember Mr. Wilson this morning? He said your smile made his whole day better." A ghost of a smile appeared on Kayla's face. "He bought 3 bottles, said he was extra thirsty. See? You weren't just selling water. You were spreading kindness. Don't let anyone make you ashamed of that." Danielle picked up the Mickey Mouse plush and made it dance, earning a small giggle from Kayla. "And Disneyland? That's not a foolish dream. It's a goal you're working toward. There's a big difference." "What's the difference?" "A foolish dream is wishing for something to happen while doing nothing about it. A goal is something you plan for and work toward, step by step." Danielle set the plush down. "You made a business plan. You saved your allowance to buy the water. You made those cute little signs. That's not foolish. That's being smart and dedicated." Kayla straightened her shoulders a bit. "Like you studying to be a nurse?" "Exactly like that. And you know what else?" Danielle lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Sometimes the people who try to stop you are the ones who are most afraid of your success. They don't want you to show them what's possible." "You think Mrs. Caldwell is afraid of me?" Kayla asked, incredulous. "I think she's afraid of what you represent. Someone who isn't afraid to work hard and dream big. Danielle pulled her daughter close. And we're not going to let her win. We're going to fight back, but we're going to do it the right way. How? By staying strong, staying honest, and showing everyone exactly who we are. Danielle's voice was firm. We've got people on our side. Mrs. Alvarez, the Patels, Officer Martinez, people who know right from wrong. Kayla sat quietly for a moment, then asked, Mom, did you ever get scared when people said you couldn't be a nurse? All the time, Danielle admitted. But being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you keep going anyway. Like how I was scared to speak at the HOA meeting. But I did it? Just like that. Danielle beamed with pride. That's my girl. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the walls orange. Kayla's breathing had steadied, and she was absently smoothing her Mickey Mouse plush's ears. Mom, she said finally, I don't want to stop selling water. Then you won't, Danielle replied simply. We'll figure it out together. Kayla nodded, a determined look replacing her earlier despair. She got up and walked to her desk, where her water stand money jar sat. She dropped in the day's earnings, the coins clinking against the glass. Danielle stood and walked to the window. From here, she could see Rebecca's house across the street, its perfectly manicured lawn and gleaming windows a testament to its owner's rigid control. The porch light clicked on automatically, right on schedule. Looking at that house, Danielle felt a steel rod of determination settle into her spine. Rebecca Caldwell might have power, might have money, might have half the neighborhood cowed, but she didn't have the right to crush a child's spirit. Not this child. Not Danielle's daughter. Through the window's reflection, she could see Kayla carefully counting her savings, lips moving silently as she added up the numbers. The sight strengthened Danielle's resolve. Some things were worth fighting for, and her daughter's right to dream big was at the top of that list. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the hastily organized block party on Maple Street. The usually quiet cul-de-sac buzzed with activity as neighbors set up folding tables and strung colorful banners between trees. The air smelled of grilled hot dogs and fresh-cut grass. Kayla gripped another folding chair, her palms sweaty as she arranged it in neat rows on the lawn. "Mom, are you sure about this?" she asked, glancing nervously at the growing crowd. Danielle paused from helping Mrs. Alvarez set up the refreshment table. "About speaking? Yes, baby. Sometimes you have to stand up and let your voice be heard." Mrs. Patel approached with a stack of paper plates. "Danielle, we've got about 50 people coming. The whole block is talking about it." She lowered her voice. "Everyone's tired of Rebecca's bullying." More neighbors arrived, carrying dishes of potato salad and fresh fruit. Children chased each other around the chairs, while parents gathered in small groups, talking in hushed tones. The atmosphere was festive but charged with purpose. "Here, let me help with those chairs," said Mr. Wilson, the retired teacher who'd bought water from Kayla. He took a few chairs from her stack. "You've got quite a turnout, young lady. People want to support good things." Kayla managed a small smile. "Thanks, Mr. Wilson." She watched as more chairs were needed, the crowd growing larger than expected. Even Officer Martinez had shown up, off-duty, and carrying a large container of his wife's famous empanadas. At the edge of the gathering, Rebecca Caldwell stood with arms crossed, her designer sundress and perfect makeup making her look out of place among the casual crowd. A few of her usual supporters hovered nearby, but they kept glancing uncertainly at the larger group. Mrs. Alvarez clinked a spoon against her glass, calling for attention. "Everyone, please take your seats. We're here today, not just for good food and company, but to talk about what kind of community we want to be." The crowd settled into the chairs Kayla had helped arrange. She sat in the front row, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt as her mother walked to the front. Danielle wore her favorite blue dress, the one she saved for special occasions, and stood tall despite her exhaustion from another long hospital shift. "Thank you all for coming," Danielle began, her voice clear and steady. "I never wanted to be at the center of any controversy. I'm just a mother trying to raise her daughter right." She paused, looking at Kayla. "But sometimes, life hands you moments where you have to choose. Stay quiet and let wrong things happen, or speak up for what's right." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Kayla sat up straighter, her chest swelling with pride. "My daughter had a dream, to visit Disneyland. Not an outrageous dream, just a child's wish to experience something magical." Danielle's voice grew stronger, and instead of asking for handouts, she came up with a plan. She saved her allowance, bought supplies, made signs, and set up a simple water stand during this hot summer. Mrs. Patel nodded vigorously, and several others smiled encouragingly. But someone decided that a 12-year-old girl selling water was a threat. Danielle's words carried across the hushed gathering. Someone decided to use power and privilege to crush a child's initiative, to shame her, to make her feel wrong for trying. In the back, Rebecca's face tightened. But Danielle continued, "This isn't just about water bottles or permits or HOA rules. It's about fairness. It's about what we teach our children about hard work and dreams. It's about whether we want to be a community that lifts each other up or tears each other down." "That's right," called out Mr. Wilson. Others voiced their agreement. "I've lived here for 8 years," Danielle said. "I've worked night shifts saving lives, raised my daughter to be honest and hardworking, and tried to be a good neighbor. All Kayla wanted was to earn her way to a dream. Is that really something we need to punish?" "No!" several voices called out. Mrs. Alvarez stood up. "Rebecca's been doing this for years. Remember when she threatened the Johnsons over their basketball hoop? Or when she fined the Garcias for their Christmas lights?" More voices joined in, sharing stories of Rebecca's petty tyranny. Officer Martinez spoke up from his seat. "As a police officer, I can say there's nothing illegal about a kid's water stand. Calling emergency services for something like that, that's the real problem." Kayla watched in amazement as neighbor after neighbor stood up to speak. Mr. Patel talked about how Kayla's cheerful greetings brightened his morning walks. Mrs. Wilson mentioned how she'd seen Kayla giving free water to the mail carrier on an especially hot day. "This is the kind of young entrepreneur we should encourage," said Mr. Chang, who owned the local hardware store. "Not shut down," Danielle raised her hand for attention. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for fairness, for the right to let my daughter pursue her dreams without harassment, for the chance to be part of a community that cares more about character than control." The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous level. People stood up, clapping and cheering. Kayla felt tears in her eyes as she saw how many neighbors were supporting them. Mrs. Alvarez hugged Danielle. "We're with you, honey. No more bullying in our neighborhood." From her spot in the back, Rebecca's face had turned an ugly shade of red. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into her arms as she watched her influence crumbling. The few supporters around her had drifted away, joining the larger group congratulating Danielle. Kayla ran to her mother, throwing her arms around her waist. "You were amazing, Mom." "We both are, baby," Danielle whispered, holding her daughter close as neighbors came up to offer support and share plates of food. Rebecca stood alone now, her face darkening with each person who walked past her to congratulate the Hendersons. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the scene unfold, her lips pressed into a thin, white line. Monday morning arrived with a gentle rain tapping against the windows of the Henderson home. Danielle, still tired from her night shift, sorted through the mail at the kitchen table while Kayla finished getting ready for school upstairs. The official city envelope stood out among the bills and advertisements. Its crisp white paper and government seal made Danielle's stomach tighten. She opened it carefully, her nursing ID badge still hanging around her neck from her shift. The letter's bold heading grabbed her attention. Notice of zoning violations. Immediate action required. "This can't be right," Danielle muttered, scanning the document. Her hands began to shake as she read the details. The letter cited multiple alleged violations: unauthorized commercial activity, improper property maintenance, and structural modifications without permits. The potential fines totaled over $15,000. "Mom?" Kayla called from upstairs. "Have you seen my blue folder?" "Check under your desk, honey," Danielle answered automatically, her mind racing as she reread the letter. None of these violations made sense. Their townhouse was well maintained, and they'd never made any modifications. She reached for her phone and Googled the zoning office. There, listed as Senior Enforcement Officer, was a familiar name: Rebecca Caldwell. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "Of course," Danielle whispered. This was her plan all along. Kayla bounded down the stairs, backpack over one shoulder. "Found it!" Her smile faded when she saw her mother's face. "Mom, what's wrong?" Danielle tried to tuck the letter away, but Kayla had already spotted it. "Is that from Ms. Caldwell again?" "No, baby, it's just—" Danielle started, but Kayla grabbed the letter before she could hide it. The girl's eyes widened as she read, her lower lip beginning to tremble. $15,000? But we didn't do anything wrong." Her voice cracked. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't tried to sell water—" "Stop right there," Danielle said firmly, pulling Kayla into a tight hug. "None of this is your fault. This is about a grown woman abusing her power because she can't stand being told no." But Kayla's shoulders shook as she cried. "My stupid Disneyland dream is going to cost us everything." "Your dreams are not stupid," Danielle insisted, wiping her daughter's tears. "And this fight isn't over." The school bus honked outside. Danielle straightened Kayla's collar and tried to sound confident. "Go to school, baby. I'll handle this." After Kayla left, Danielle called the zoning office. The receptionist transferred her to Rebecca's direct line. "Senior Enforcement Officer Caldwell speaking." Rebecca's smug voice dripped with satisfaction. "This is Danielle Henderson. I think there's been a mistake with—" "Oh, Mrs. Henderson," Rebecca interrupted. "I was just reviewing your case file. Quite serious violations we've uncovered. Of course, if you'd been more cooperative earlier, perhaps this could have been avoided." "These allegations are false, and you know it," Danielle said, keeping her voice steady despite her anger. "Are they?" Rebecca's tone turned icy. "I have photographic evidence, witness statements, and years of experience identifying code violations. The fines are quite standard for these infractions, though they do tend to increase if not addressed promptly. This is harassment. This is enforcement of city ordinances, Mrs. Henderson. Perhaps you should have thought about consequences before organizing that little rebellion against properly constituted authority." The line went dead. Danielle stared at her phone, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling over her. She'd known Rebecca had influence in the HOA, but this was different. This was government power being wielded like a weapon. Across town, in her office at the city municipal building, Rebecca Caldwell sat at her desk, a satisfied smile playing across her lips as she carefully arranged documents in a fresh manila folder. She labeled it Henderson Property Violations in her precise handwriting. The morning sun streaming through her office window glinted off her nameplate. Rebecca Caldwell, Senior Enforcement Officer, Zoning Department. Years of carefully cultivated authority were represented in that title, and she wasn't about to let some uppity nurse and her bratty kid challenge it. She pulled up the property database on her computer, marking the Henderson case as Priority Enforcement. Her fingers moved efficiently across the keyboard as she scheduled inspections, filed preliminary findings, and set the bureaucratic machinery in motion. Back at home, Danielle sank into her kitchen chair, the letter lying accusingly on the table before her. The morning rain had turned heavier, drumming against the windows like angry fingers. She hadn't slept since her night shift, and exhaustion wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. Their modest townhouse, usually a sanctuary after long hospital shifts, felt suddenly vulnerable. Every creak and settling sound seemed ominous, as if city inspectors might appear at any moment to scrutinize their lives. Pictures of Kayla lined the walls, her first day of school, winning the science fair, practicing her sales pitch for her water stand. The sight of her daughter's hopeful face in those photos made Danielle's chest ache. In her office, Rebecca added one final document to the Henderson file, a schedule of escalating fines that would begin in exactly 7 days. She closed the folder with a satisfying thump and placed it prominently on her desk, ready for tomorrow's enforcement meeting. "Let's see how that little block party holds up against real authority," she murmured, straightening a pen on her pristine desk. Her position here, built over years of careful networking and strategic alliances, was unassailable. No one would dare challenge a senior zoning officer's findings, especially not a single mother who couldn't possibly afford the legal fees to fight back. That evening, the Henderson kitchen felt different. The usual warmth and chatter that filled their dinner time had been replaced by the soft clink of forks against plates and the hollow sound of ice shifting in water glasses. The zoning notice sat on the counter behind them like an unwelcome guest, its presence poisoning the air. Danielle watched as Kayla pushed her spaghetti around her plate, barely eating. The girl's shoulders were slumped, her usual bright energy dimmed to a shadow. Outside, streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows through their kitchen window. "Mom?" Kayla's voice was small, barely above a whisper. "Yes, baby?" "Are we?" Kayla swallowed hard, her fork trembling slightly in her hand. "Are we going to lose our home?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Danielle put down her own fork and reached across the table, covering Kayla's hand with her own. Her daughter's skin felt cold. "No, sweetie, we're not going to lose our home." Danielle tried to inject confidence into her voice, but even she could hear the slight tremor of uncertainty. "Miss Caldwell is just trying to scare us." "But $15,000? Kayla's eyes welled up. "That's so much money. And it's all because I wanted to sell water." "Listen to me," Danielle said firmly, squeezing her daughter's hand. "This isn't about water or permits or any of that. This is about a woman who doesn't like being told she can't push people around." But Kayla just nodded silently, unconvinced. She took a small bite of spaghetti, more to please her mother than from any real appetite. "Maybe I should write her a letter, saying I'm sorry," Kayla suggested quietly. "Maybe if I promise never to sell anything again?" "No." Danielle's voice came out sharper than she intended, making Kayla flinch. She softened her tone. "Baby, you have nothing to apologize for." "Nothing." They finished dinner in silence, the food tasting like cardboard in their mouths. Danielle watched as Kayla took her plate to the sink, her movements slow and heavy, like she was carrying an invisible weight. "Time for bed, sweetheart," Danielle said after they'd cleaned up. "You've got that math test tomorrow." Kayla nodded, giving her mother a quick hug that felt more like a plea for reassurance than their usual loving embrace. "Good night, Mom." "Good night, baby. Sweet dreams." Danielle waited until she heard Kayla's bedroom door close before letting her brave face crumble. She slumped at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, the zoning notice, HOA documents, their mortgage statement, her nursing schedule. The numbers swam before her tired eyes. $15,000. It might as well have been $15 million. Even with her nursing salary and overtime, they were already stretched thin. The mortgage, Kayla's school expenses, utilities, it all added up to a delicate balance that this fine would shatter. She rubbed her temples, fighting back a stress headache. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence, marking time like a countdown. 7 days until the fines began. 7 days to figure out how to fight back against a woman who seemed to hold all the cards. But as Danielle sat there, something started nagging at her memory. Rebecca's words from the HOA meetings began replaying in her mind. The way she'd openly admitted targeting certain residents. Her smug comments about maintaining neighborhood standards while glancing meaningfully at the few minority homeowners. Danielle grabbed a notepad and began writing. The time Rebecca had threatened Mrs. Alvarez with fines for her ethnic garden decorations. The incident with the Johnson family's basketball hoop. The suspicious pattern of HOA violations that seemed to focus on certain households. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through the neighborhood social media group. There were Rebecca's posts, full of thinly veiled prejudice and threats, preserved in digital amber. Danielle started taking screenshots, saving them to a folder. Then she remembered her own interactions with Rebecca. The HOA president hadn't been careful with her words, confident in her power. She'd made direct threats, implied discriminatory motives, even admitted to using her city position against residents she disliked. Danielle's nursing training kicked in. Document everything, create a clear record, establish patterns. She began organizing her notes, marking dates and times, listing witnesses. The stack of evidence grew as memories surfaced. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Alvarez. Heard about the zoning notice. Rebecca did the same to my cousin's family last year. They had to move. Don't let her win. Danielle's jaw tightened. The defeated feeling from earlier began to transform into something else. Determination. Rebecca had made one crucial mistake. She'd gotten cocky. She'd left a trail. Reaching for her phone again, Danielle scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Marcus Riley, a young civil rights attorney she'd met when he was hospitalized for appendicitis last year. They'd talked during his recovery about his work fighting housing discrimination and abuse of power. She glanced at the clock, nearly 10 p.m. Late, but this couldn't wait. The phone rang 3 times before he answered. Marcus, this is Danielle Henderson from Central Hospital. She took a deep breath. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need your help. Do you have time to meet? I think I have a case you might be interested in. The next morning's sun cast long shadows across the Sweetwater Cafe's outdoor patio. Danielle sat with her hands wrapped around a steaming coffee mug, watching Kayla absently stir her hot chocolate. The morning crowd buzzed around them, business people grabbing breakfast, joggers stopping for smoothies, seniors enjoying their daily coffee meetups. Marcus Riley arrived exactly on time, dressed in a crisp blue button-down with his sleeves rolled up, carrying a worn leather briefcase. His friendly smile put them both at ease immediately. Ms. Henderson, he said warmly, shaking Danielle's hand before turning to Kayla. And you must be the entrepreneurial spirit I've heard about. Kayla managed a shy smile, sitting up a little straighter. Thank you for meeting us so early, Danielle said as Marcus settled into his chair. I know you must be busy. Never too busy to help someone stand up to a bully, Marcus replied, pulling out a legal pad. Why don't you walk me through everything from the beginning? Danielle took a deep breath and started with Kayla's water stand. She described Rebecca's escalating harassment, the police call, the HOA meetings, and finally, the zoning violation threat. As she spoke, Marcus took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. And you're certain she used her position at the zoning office to target you specifically? he asked, underlining something in his notes. Yes, Danielle nodded firmly. She practically bragged about it at the HOA meeting. Said she'd make sure proper authorities handled the situation. Marcus's pen paused. Did anyone else hear her say that? At least 10 neighbors were there. Mrs. Alvarez even recorded part of the meeting on her phone. A slight smile touched Marcus's lips. That's good. Very good. He turned to a fresh page. What other evidence do you have of her pattern of discrimination? Danielle pulled out her phone, showing him the screenshots she'd collected. These are from the neighborhood social media group. Look how she talks about certain elements changing the community's character. Marcus leaned forward, studying the posts. This is exactly what we need. But we'll need more. He looked up at them both. From this moment on, document everything. Every interaction, every threat, every notice. Record dates, times, witnesses. If she approaches you in person, use your phone to record audio. Georgia is a one-party consent state. You don't need her permission. Kayla, who had been quiet until now, suddenly perked up. Like collecting evidence for a case file? Marcus grinned. Exactly like that. In fact, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a fresh notebook, handing it to Kayla. Would you like to be our official case organizer? Kayla's eyes lit up as she took the notebook. Really? Really. We need someone detail-oriented to keep track of everything. Your mom mentioned you're good at organizing. Danielle watched as her daughter began immediately writing the date and time on the first page, dividing it into neat sections. Marcus turned back to Danielle. We'll need statements from other neighbors who've experienced similar treatment. The more we can establish a pattern of discriminatory behavior, the stronger our case becomes. Mrs. Alvarez already offered to help, Danielle said. And the Johnsons. I think others will come forward too, now that someone's finally standing up to her. Good. And keep copies of everything. Photos, emails, texts. Back them up to the cloud. Marcus pulled out his business card. Send it all to me. I'll start preparing for a civil rights complaint and potential lawsuit. Lawsuit? Danielle's voice wavered slightly. I don't know if I can afford... Marcus held up his hand. We'll work something out. Cases like this, they're why I became a lawyer. Sometimes you have to fight back to create change. Kayla had filled 2 pages of her notebook already. Mom, we should get one of those accordion files, like you use for bills. We can color code everything. Danielle couldn't help smiling at her daughter's renewed enthusiasm. It was the first time she'd seen that spark in Kayla's eyes since Rebecca's harassment began. These cases can take time, Marcus cautioned. Rebecca won't back down easily. She's used to wielding power without consequences. But if we're methodical, if we build our case carefully... He closed his notebook with satisfaction. We can show exactly how she's abusing her authority. What about the zoning fine? Danielle asked. We only have 7 days. I'll file an immediate appeal, Marcus assured her. That'll freeze the timeline. And once we present evidence that she's using her position for personal vendettas, the city will have to investigate. They spent the next hour outlining their strategy. Marcus explained the legal process while Kayla took detailed notes, adding little drawings in the margins. Danielle felt the weight of helplessness lifting with each passing minute, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. As they prepared to leave, Marcus shook both their hands again. Remember, document everything, build the evidence, and don't let her provoke you into doing anything rash. We'll fight this smart. Walking to their car, Kayla clutched her notebook to her chest like a treasure. Mom, can we stop at the office supply store? I want to get those sticky tabs to mark important stuff. Danielle pulled her daughter close, hugging her tight. Of course we can, baby. She pressed her lips to Kayla's forehead and whispered, We're going to fight smart, and we're going to win. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Danielle and Marcus worked methodically through the neighborhood, visiting homes where Rebecca's influence had left its mark. Kayla's notebook, now adorned with colored tabs and careful labels, grew thicker with each new testimony. Their first stop was Mrs. Alvarez's neat brick townhouse. The elderly woman's hands trembled as she poured them coffee, her accent thickening with emotion as she described Rebecca's campaign against her garden. "She said my vegetables were unsightly," Mrs. Alvarez explained, gesturing to the thriving tomato plants on her patio. "Called them inappropriate for our community's aesthetic. But the Petersons, they have the same garden setup. Only difference?" She smiled sadly. "They're not Latino." Marcus recorded everything while Kayla made careful notes, drawing little tomatoes in the margins of her notebook. The Washingtons, 3 doors down from Danielle, shared their story next. Mr. Washington, a retired postal worker, showed them a stack of HOA violations, all for minor issues like grass being half an inch too tall or leaving his trash can out 10 minutes too long. "White folks on the block do the same things," he said, shaking his head. But somehow, Rebecca only sees violations at certain houses. His wife nodded grimly beside him. Each visit revealed a similar pattern. The Chen family had been fined for Chinese New Year decorations, while Christmas lights stayed up year-round on other homes. The Rodriguez children were reported for noise violations while playing basketball, but the Tucker kids' weekly band practice went unchallenged. Some neighbors were hesitant at first, afraid of retaliation. But Marcus explained how their collective testimony could create change. "Together," he said repeatedly, "we can show this isn't about individual incidents. It's about systematic discrimination." By Wednesday, word had spread. People began reaching out to Danielle, sharing stories in hushed voices at the mailbox, or sending careful texts asking to meet. The Thompson family invited them over after dinner one evening. Their teenage son had been running a successful lawn care business until Rebecca discovered he was undercutting her brother-in-law's landscaping company. Suddenly, there were all these rules about commercial activity in residential areas. Mrs. Thompson explained, her voice tight with anger. But when Katie Weber started her babysitting service, not a peep from Rebecca. Kayla sat cross-legged on their floor, transcribing everything into her notebook. She'd developed her own organizational system, color-coding incidents by type. Green for garden violations, blue for noise complaints, red for business interference. The breakthrough came on Friday when Sarah Martinez, Rebecca's former assistant at the zoning office, agreed to meet them at a coffee shop across town. "I quit last month," Sarah told them, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I couldn't take it anymore." The way she'd pull up property records for people she didn't like, looking for any tiny violation. How she'd fast-track complaints against certain homeowners while burying others. Marcus leaned forward. "Would you be willing to testify about this?" Sarah hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "Yes. I kept copies of everything. Emails, memos, her special review list. It was wrong, what she was doing. Someone needs to stop her." That evening, Danielle and Kayla spread their gathered evidence across their dining room table. Witness statements, photographs, violation notices, social media screenshots, all carefully organized in Kayla's system. Marcus stood at the end of the table, reviewing their progress. "Look at this timeline," Kayla said proudly, unfolding a large chart she'd created. Red dots marked each incident, clustering notably around homes owned by minorities. "This is incredible work, Kayla," Marcus said, studying the pattern. "You could have a future in legal research." Danielle watched her daughter beam at the praise, remembering how defeated she'd looked just a week ago. Now Kayla moved with purpose, explaining her organizing system to Marcus with growing confidence. The neighborhood had changed too. Where there had been isolated pockets of fear and resentment, now there was unity. Neighbors who had never spoken began sharing stories, recognizing their common struggle. People started watching out for each other, documenting Rebecca's movements, warning others when she was on one of her inspection walks. Mrs. Alvarez organized a weekend potluck where more neighbors came forward. The Washingtons hosted a strategy meeting in their garage. The Thompsons' son offered free lawn care to anyone testifying against Rebecca. Looking at the thick folders of evidence, Danielle felt a surge of pride. Not just in their case, but in her community. Rebecca had tried to divide them, but her actions had ultimately brought them together. "Mom, look!" Kayla called from the table. She'd arranged all their documentation chronologically. "We can show exactly when Rebecca started targeting people more after she got the zoning job." Danielle moved to stand behind her daughter, placing her hands on Kayla's shoulders. The table before them told a clear story of discrimination and abuse of power. Every colored tab, every carefully labeled section represented someone who'd found the courage to speak up. Marcus gathered the files into his briefcase, nodding with satisfaction. "We've got more than enough to move forward. The pattern is undeniable." Danielle looked at their work, the product of a community finally standing together, and felt ready. Ready to face Rebecca. Ready to demand justice. Ready to show her daughter that bullies don't win when people unite against them. "What's next?" she asked Marcus, her voice steady and sure. The city council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Every wooden bench was filled, with people standing along the walls and spilling into the hallway outside. Danielle smoothed her navy dress, a gesture more about calming nerves than wrinkles. Beside her, Kayla sat straight-backed in her best yellow sundress, clutching her notebook like a shield. Marcus arranged his files on the table before them, each color-coded tab a piece of their carefully constructed case. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the wood-paneled walls, making everyone look slightly on edge. Rebecca swept in through the side door, wearing an expensive gray suit and pearls. She nodded to several council members as if they were old friends, settling into her chair with the comfortable air of someone who'd never lost a battle in this room. Council President Thompson called the meeting to order, his gavel crack echoing through the chamber. "We're here today to address serious allegations regarding abuse of power in the zoning office and discriminatory HOA practices." Marcus rose smoothly. "Thank you, Mr. President. I represent Danielle Henderson and, by extension, multiple residents of Oakwood Heights who have experienced systematic discrimination and harassment." Rebecca's lawyer, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, interjected. "These are baseless accusations from disgruntled residents who simply refuse to follow community guidelines." The council president gestured for Danielle to take the podium. She squeezed Kayla's hand before walking forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The familiar faces of her neighbors gave her strength. Mrs. Alvarez dabbing her eyes with a tissue, Mr. Washington nodding encouragement, the Thompsons sitting tall and proud. "My name is Danielle Henderson," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I'm a registered nurse at Atlanta General, a homeowner, and most importantly, a mother. What began with my 12-year-old daughter selling water bottles has exposed a pattern of discrimination that affects our entire community." She walked the council through the evidence, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the ugly nature of Rebecca's actions. "Ms. Caldwell didn't just target my daughter's small enterprise. She weaponized her position as HOA president and zoning officer to harass families based on their race and ethnicity." The projector displayed Kayla's timeline, the red dots clustering around minority-owned homes impossible to ignore. Photographs of similar violations treated differently based on the homeowner's race appeared on screen. Rebecca shifted in her seat, her confident smile wavering. Sarah Martinez testified next, her voice growing stronger as she detailed Rebecca's manipulation of zoning records. She kept a special list of problem properties, all owned by minority residents. She fast-tracked their violations while ignoring identical issues from other homeowners. Mrs. Alvarez described the garden discrimination, Mr. Washington detailed the selective enforcement, and the Thompsons explained the business interference. Each testimony built upon the last, creating an undeniable pattern. When Kayla's turn came, she walked to the podium clutching her notebook. At first, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to go to Disneyland with my mom." She swallowed hard, then continued stronger. "I thought if I worked hard and saved money, I could make my dream come true. But Ms. Caldwell," her voice caught. The room fell silent, everyone leaning forward slightly. "She didn't just say no. She made me feel like I was doing something wrong. Like I was wrong for even being there." Kayla's chin lifted. "But my mom taught me that dreams are worth fighting for, and that bullies shouldn't win just because they're loud." A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber. Rebecca's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but she waved him off, her face flushing with anger. When Rebecca took the stand, her usual poise cracked almost immediately under Marcus's questioning. "Is it true? You told Mrs. Alvarez her garden violated HOA rules while allowing identical gardens at other homes?" "Those other situations were different," Rebecca snapped. "Different how?" Marcus pressed. "The aesthetic impact? The aesthetic impact of identical tomato plants?" Marcus gestured to the photos on screen. "Or was the difference the heritage of the gardener?" Rebecca's hands clenched the podium. "I was simply enforcing standards. Like when you cited the Chen family for cultural decorations, but ignored year-round Christmas lights?" "That's not." Rebecca's voice rose. "These people need to learn to follow rules." "These people?" Marcus repeated quietly. The chamber erupted in whispers. Rebecca's face reddened further as she realized her slip. "I meant these residents," she stammered. "Your Honor," Marcus addressed the council president, "I'd like to present Ms. Caldwell's internal email correspondence regarding property enforcement." Rebecca's eyes widened. "You can't." "Emails sent from government servers are public record," Marcus reminded her, "including ones where you referred to certain homeowners as those people and instructed staff to watch certain neighborhoods more closely." Rebecca's composure crumbled completely. "They're ruining everything," she burst out, "with their gardens and their children and their noise. This neighborhood used to have standards." The chamber fell silent at her outburst. Council members exchanged glances. Rebecca's lawyer buried his face in his hands. "Standards?" Danielle's voice cut through the silence. "Or just certain colors." Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it, then slumped in her seat as decades of carefully maintained control slipped through her fingers. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, faces showing disgust and disappointment where there had once been fear. The council president cleared his throat. "I believe we've heard enough to proceed with a vote." The council members huddled together at their elevated desk, passing notes and whispering urgently. The chamber remained packed but hushed, like a theater before the final act. Sweat beaded on Rebecca's forehead as she watched them deliberate, her fingers drumming an anxious rhythm on the table. Danielle squeezed Kayla's hand, both of them barely breathing. Marcus straightened his papers with steady hands, but his eyes never left the council. The minutes stretched like hours under the harsh fluorescent lights. Council President Thompson finally cleared his throat, tapping his microphone. The sound echoed through the chamber, making several people jump. After reviewing the extensive evidence presented today, he began, his voice grave, "This council finds Ms. Caldwell's actions deeply troubling and in direct violation of multiple city ordinances and ethical guidelines." Rebecca's face drained of color. Her lawyer scribbled frantically on his legal pad. The documentation shows a clear pattern of discriminatory enforcement, abuse of authority, and misuse of government resources, Thompson continued. Therefore, this council moves to immediately terminate Ms. Caldwell's position as zoning enforcement officer. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Rebecca shot to her feet, but her lawyer pulled her back down. Furthermore, Thompson's voice grew stronger. We are launching a full investigation into all zoning decisions made during her tenure, with particular attention to potentially discriminatory actions. The city attorney will review cases for possible civil rights violations. Kayla squeezed her mother's hand tighter, hardly daring to smile yet. Danielle remained perfectly still, her face composed but her eyes shining. All in favor? Thompson asked his fellow council members. Hands rose around the table. 1, then 3, then 7. Rebecca watched each vote like a blow landing. When the final hand went up, making the decision unanimous, she slumped in her chair. But the chamber wasn't finished. Mrs. Alvarez stood up from her seat, her voice clear and strong. As HOA Vice President, I move to call an emergency meeting to remove Miss Caldwell as president, effective immediately. Second, Mr. Washington called out, followed by a chorus of ayes from other HOA members present. Rebecca's carefully constructed world was crumbling brick by brick. She grabbed her water glass with trembling hands, but it slipped through her fingers, shattering on the floor. The crash seemed to break something inside her as well. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, shoving away from the table. "I've given 20 years to this community. I've maintained standards. I've protected property values." Camera flashes popped as reporters captured her meltdown. Rebecca spun toward them, her face contorted. "Stop that! You can't! I demand you stop photographing me!" "Ms. Caldwell," a reporter called out, "how do you respond to allegations that you specifically targeted minority homeowners?" "This is all their fault," Rebecca jabbed a finger toward Danielle and Kayla. "That child, running a business without permits, and her mother, turning everyone against me. I was doing my job. Your job was to serve all residents equally," Council President Thompson cut in sharply. "Not to abuse your authority for personal prejudices. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel crack was lost in the surge of voices as people stood, some cheering, others rushing to speak to reporters. Rebecca's lawyer tried to hustle her toward a side door, but she yanked away from him. "You'll see," she shouted, mascara starting to run. "Property values will plummet. The neighborhood will fall apart. You'll wish you had someone willing to maintain standards." But no one was listening anymore. The crowd had turned toward Danielle and Kayla, offering congratulations and hugs. Mrs. Alvarez wrapped them both in a warm embrace, whispering proud words in Spanish and English. "Miss Henderson," a reporter called out, "how does it feel to have exposed this discrimination?" Danielle drew Kayla close before answering. This was never about one person or one incident. It was about standing up for what's right, about teaching our children that dreams deserve respect, and that justice matters more than power. Kayla beamed up at her mother, all traces of the shy girl gone. More cameras flashed, capturing their victory smiles. Marcus gathered their files, nodding with satisfaction. "The civil rights investigation will probably uncover even more," he said quietly to Danielle. "This is just the beginning of consequences for her actions." They made their way toward the chamber doors, surrounded by well-wishers. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, painting everything in warm light. Mr. Washington held the door open with a flourish. "After you, ladies," he said, grinning. "I believe there's quite a celebration waiting outside." He wasn't exaggerating. The courthouse steps were packed with neighbors and supporters, many holding handmade signs celebrating justice and community. A cheer went up as Danielle and Kayla emerged into the sunlight. Behind them, through the closing door, they could hear Rebecca's final angry sobs echoing in the nearly empty chamber. Her perfectly styled hair had come loose, her expensive suit was wrinkled, and her power was gone. The woman who had terrorized the neighborhood for so long suddenly looked small and broken, surrounded only by scattered papers and her own bitter tears. But Danielle and Kayla didn't look back. They descended the courthouse steps into the arms of their true community, surrounded by the neighbors who had stood with them, fought beside them, and now celebrated their shared victory. The warm Georgia sun wrapped around them like a blessing, marking the end of fear and the triumph of justice. A week later, early morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the Henderson home, casting warm patterns across two open suitcases on Kayla's bedroom floor. Disney character stickers decorated the purple luggage, carefully placed to cover every available space. "Mom!" Kayla called out, holding up two different swimsuits. "Which one should I bring?" Danielle poked her head in, already dressed in comfortable travel clothes. "Both, sweetie. We'll be there for 5 days, remember?" She smiled at the explosion of clothes and souvenirs scattered across the room. Though maybe pack a few actual outfits too, not just swimsuits. Kayla giggled and started folding her clothes with careful precision. She'd watched 3 different YouTube videos about the best way to pack for Disneyland, determined to do everything perfectly. Her excitement was contagious, filling their home with an energy that made even ordinary packing feel magical. "Did you see the card Mrs. Alvarez brought over last night?" Danielle asked, picking up a colorful envelope from Kayla's desk. Inside was a handmade card signed by dozens of neighbors, along with gift cards for Disney merchandise and restaurants. "And Mr. Washington's travel tips," Kayla added, pulling out a carefully typed list of ride recommendations and showtimes. "He said the fireworks are best viewed from right in front of the castle." The community's response had been overwhelming. After the hearing, local businesses had started a donation drive for their trip. The neighborhood coffee shop where Kayla sometimes did homework had put up a collection jar that filled 3 times over. The hospital staff pitched in, and even the police officers who'd responded that first day contributed to their travel fund. "Almost ready?" Danielle asked, checking her watch. Their flight wasn't until afternoon, but she wanted to avoid any rush. "Just need to pack my Mickey ears." Kayla carefully wrapped the sparkly ears she'd received from her school friends in tissue paper. "And my camera, and my autograph book, and pack now, list later." Danielle laughed, helping to close the overstuffed suitcase. "The car's already loaded with my bags." They carried Kayla's luggage downstairs, where breakfast dishes still sat in the sink from their excited morning meal. Danielle had made Mickey-shaped pancakes, though some looked more like abstract art than the famous mouse. Outside, the summer morning was already warming up, but a gentle breeze kept it pleasant. Their small SUV waited in the driveway, trunk open and ready. As they wheeled the suitcases out, neighbors waved from their yards and porches. "Have fun, Kayla," called Jenny from next door, pausing her garden watering. "Take lots of pictures." "Bring me back some mouse ears," shouted Tommy, her classmate from down the street. Loading the final bags, they couldn't help but notice Rebecca's house across the way. The "For Sale" sign stood prominent in the front yard, its red letters declaring "Reduced Price" in bold text. The pristine lawn Rebecca had once used as proof of her superior standards was growing patchy, with dandelions beginning to spot the grass. Movement caught their eye, a curtain twitching in the front window. Rebecca's face appeared briefly, pinched and bitter, before vanishing back into the shadows of her empty house. Most of her furniture had already been moved out, according to Mrs. Alvarez, who kept track of such things. The investigation into her tenure as zoning officer had uncovered even more discriminatory actions, leading to multiple civil rights complaints. But Kayla, spotting the movement, simply smiled and waved at the window. Not a mocking wave, just the natural friendliness of a child whose heart held no room for bitterness. The curtain twitched again, but stayed closed. "Ready for adventure?" Danielle asked, closing the trunk with a satisfying thunk. "Ready!" Kayla bounced on her toes, practically vibrating with excitement. They climbed into the car, Kayla clutching her Disney Parks guidebook like a treasure map. As Danielle backed out of the driveway, more neighbors emerged to wave goodbye. Mrs. Alvarez blew kisses. Mr. Washington gave a thumbs up. Even grumpy old Mr. Peterson, who rarely left his house, stood on his porch, waving a small American flag. "Look, Mom," Kayla said softly as they drove past Rebecca's house one last time. "The dandelions are pretty." Danielle glanced at the yellow flowers dotting the lawn Rebecca had once policed with such ferocity. "They are, aren't they? Sometimes the things people fight hardest against turn out to be beautiful." They turned onto the main road, leaving their neighborhood behind. Traffic was light as they headed toward the airport, and Kayla settled back in her seat, humming "It's a Small World" under her breath. "Mom?" she said after a few minutes, leaning her head against Danielle's shoulder. "Dreams are worth fighting for." Danielle took one hand off the wheel to kiss her daughter's forehead, feeling a surge of pride and love so strong it brought tears to her eyes. They had won more than just a trip to Disneyland. They had shown their community the power of standing together against injustice. They had taught others that dreams deserved respect, no matter whose dreams they were. Most importantly, they had reclaimed their dignity and helped others find their voices, too. The morning sun painted the road ahead in gold, and Kayla's guidebook lay open to a page showing the magical castle. In the rearview mirror, their neighborhood grew smaller until it disappeared, but the strength they had found there would stay with them forever. Kayla started softly singing "When You Wish Upon a Star," and Danielle joined in, their voices blending as they drove toward their hard-won dreams. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.